Good evening, everybody. We're so excited to be on tonight. You are joining us for our seventh episode of Mental Moments. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. Please reach out to your friends and family members and tell them to log on. We are celebrating Social Worker Month. We know. And look, I got are you a social worker, Malira?
I sure am.
Okay, so I have my co-host here, Malara Green, who is a social worker, also a therapist. She is the people's therapist. So tonight, we have an awesome show. We all know that this month was Women's History Month, and we celebrate. I like to celebrate me every single day if I have the opportunity. Yes, yes. And it's also Social Worker Month. And so we know that since the pandemic, and even the past couple of years, the opioid pandemic, mental health, suicide, all of that has risen in the US in the past several years. And so Malara and myself, we counted out robbery for us to get on every single Wednesday night, at least every single Wednesday night, if not any other day during the week. But we always want to bring awareness to mental health in our communities, the Black and white community, any community. We're all suffering, and a lot of us are suffering in silence. And those that are on the front line are our social workers. They get it all. And so who's going to help the therapist? Who's going to help the social worker? So tonight on tonight's show, we have three awesome guests that Malara will be introducing that will share with us the life of social working and how do they find the calling? Because to me, I feel like there is a calling.
Yeah.
If you're a teacher, if you're a mother, there is a calling that you have to have in your life to be compassionate and understanding towards people that are suffering. So Malara, without further ado, could you please introduce our guests and bring them on to the platform?
I sure can. Listen, y'all, I'm super hyped. As a social worker, we are the unsung heroes. You know, we have a whole month, but y'all probably didn't hear about it until tonight. So I wanted to make sure that I got myself and some of amazing colleagues to come on and really share with you what social work is. Like, we're bigger than baby takers. I don't take nobody babies. You know, we're bigger than just that person that gives benefits and things like that. But each of the guests who are coming on is in different capacities in the social work field. And I'm super excited for that. So I want to first actually have Anthony Hopkins join on first. He is in the outpatient realm of things. He is my go-to person when it comes to my Black men for sure. But he's really big when it comes to teaching our youth how to create positive lifestyles. So then when they become adults, they don't have to start over. So I'm super excited to have Anthony. Believe it or not, I am an LCSW behind my name because of this man. He was actually one of my clinical supervisors. So have to give kudos to him where it belongs. Our next person we have is Sheridan Merriweather. And she is all you social work for sure. But right now, the capacity that she really focused on is more of the administrative and clinical support, which is super dope and amazing. So yes, she does therapy, but she is the helper to the helper. She is the social worker to the social worker to make sure that we communicate our needs to our clients in the right capacity. She also works with individuals who have had different sexual challenges. So she does work in that capacity and does the assessments and all those things. So that is Sheridan in her capacity. And last but not least, my male best friend, I got to say that Mr. Mike Jones himself, Mike Jones, my best friend. And he is working in the legal capacity right now, but he does so much when it comes to fatherhood, it comes to tutoring. He is the one that does social work unapologetically in different capacities, and he also brings it into the church, which is super duper amazing, being able to advocate for needs. So every last social worker on the screen, I have personal connections with. So I want to tell y'all, thank y'all for joining on. And I'm going to give you guys the mic to just share literally what made you choose social work. And we'll start with you, Anthony.
Well, hello and good evening, and thank you. In terms of what started social work for me, honestly, it was a conversation with my mother because love studying the mind. And when I spoke with my mother about it, I'll never forget, she was like, yeah, psychology sounds good, but if you want to be able to make money and do the things like you know how to do, because I was always the person that people came to with their problems, she was like, I think you should try social work. So I followed in what she said, and the rest was history. And I always believe this profession chooses us because there's a million other things we could be doing, but something in our hearts, something guided us to be that calm in the storm for those around us.
That's so powerful. What about you, Sheridan?
I totally agree that social work chose me. I did not choose social work. um, I wanted to do management information systems, and then I decided that the math classes were too much, so I ventured over to social work. Um, and it was exactly what I needed when I needed it. I just didn't realize that. And I've worked in different capacities and different roles, and it's actually played a major part in my life too, because I like knowing people's backgrounds to help them move forward in life, and just moving past their trauma. So it's definitely been an experience since I've been here.
So my question would be, how much school does it take in order to, if someone wanted to pursue a career in social work, um, what education is involved?
So it really just depends on what realm of social work you want to go into. So one thing about it, each state has their own clause. So in the state of Virginia, in order for you to call yourself a social worker, you must have at least a bachelor's degree in social work. So the cool part with social work is, depending on how far you want to go, you can do things on a bachelor's level, and you can do things having your DSW, which is a doctorate in social work. In order to actually have your license, however, you do at least need to have a master's from an accredited social work program. And you complete either 1 year if you do advanced standing if your background is social work, or you do 2 years if your background is not social work, because you need that generalist practice background. And then once you do that, there's another 2 to 4 year process to actually obtain your license. For other professions, they call it residency. We call it more just being a supervisor in social work, where we take 2 years of on the job, um, hand on practice, and we have to pass an examination for us to hold that license. So it really just depends on what realm you want to go into, which makes me say, Mike, what made you go into social work? Because I also know you kind of done it in different capacities as well as having your MDiv too. So wanted to give you the floor.
Yeah, so I initially wasn't interested in social work. I was going for my undergraduate degree in mathematics so that I could be a math teacher. I was returning to school. After some time, my wife and I were in school together as non traditional students, and she was a social work major, and she had an incredible professor, Dr. Colita Fairfax. And my wife would come home every day and tell me what she was learning in her social work class. And I was already thinking that I didn't want to do the math thing anymore. And I was curious about what type of professional education I could get so that I could be competent to help people in whatever area that I was. And I was really kind of inspired by the social justice aspect of social work. So I was led into social work by my wife and my favorite professor.
Wow, Sheridan. She's shaking her head. Sheridan, Sheridan, we asking you, Sheridan, can you hear us? She can't. She can't hear us.
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
But I think I thought I said, yeah, I said earlier, I didn't want to do social work. I came into social work because I didn't want to do the math classes for the management information systems. And I said, what's going to get me through college faster? Because that was going to take me like several years. And versus this one only took 4. And then I went and got my MSW immediately afterwards. And I had credits that went towards that. So I wasn't in school as long as everybody else.
Okay, so being that we know that social work is a demanding job, it's a demanding job. Did they prepare you? Do you feel like the classwork or the classes that you took to get your degree, do you think it emotionally prepared you for what you were going to face in the social work field? The
Mm,
things that you would see or witness or
absolutely not, toxic. That is exactly why I want to be a higher education professor. That's why I literally honor my life.
Look at Sheridan. She's like, no.
Being a clinical supervisor for me gives me that, because in the classroom, you only have a certain amount of time to give to your students. That's number one. So I don't want to put out there that it's like social work professors just don't care about their students. It's not really that. There's so many different keys that go with that. So the higher education system right now, and I'm going to go geeky for you just a little bit, they're really big on having people that have doctoral degrees now teaching the students. But what ends up happening is those who have doctoral degrees in social work has been out of the field for sometimes 15 plus years.
So they're lost in the sauce. They don't even know what's really
correct.
going on.
So you can teach me book work, but you can't teach me really what's going on. So for example, when I did get the opportunity to be an adjunct professor, my students thought that it was a breath of fresh air because I'm actually in the field still doing the work. So not only was I giving them book stuff, I was also giving them my experience. And a lot of professors don't have that anymore. On top of, because it is demanding, people don't talk about the emotional side of it. Like, one thing I can say about my actual program at Norfolk State, they were really adamant about us going to counseling. They were adamant about us at least having mentors or, friends or people to kind of support, because they understood that. One of my professors, her name was Dr. Sawyer. Dr. Sawyer would tell us about our empathic edge. She said, everybody's going to bring baggage into the room. You just got to know how to deal with your own baggage. When you have professors like that teach you in that way, it helps. But it really we are not adequately prepared whatsoever.
Anthony, did they prepare you?
No.
And if they didn't, how did you course correct? So once you got into the field and you're like, oh man, they got me out here in the deep and I can't swim like that. Like, I'm in 12 feet and I'm 6 feet tall. So how did you course correct?
Trial and error. It's interesting that Malara, you mentioned Dr. Sawyer, because she was a prolific professor. I remember the one thing she taught me was, remember what it feels like to be on the other side of the desk. Never forget, never overlook that. Now, to answer your question, when in the work that I did, even starting out in the profession, we were thrown to the wolves a lot. We had our practicums. Our practicums in my day, our practicums were about, we a lot of times sat, we did ride-alongs, we did learn to do documentation when we're doing our version of our process notes, and we read policy. Sometimes a whole day would just consist of you're sitting there learning policy. So balancing that, then balancing the demands of the schoolwork, of our coursework that we have to complete because we're trying to graduate. We often just said, hey, you got to learn it this way. You got to do it this way. And I believe one professor at the very end, I can't recall his name, was the first person to start talking about it. But a lot of it was trial and error. To be in front of a family and all chaos breaks loose, you got to learn to get on your feet quick. But I did have
and get the hell out of there.
Yeah. But I did also have some good mentors along the way. Mr. Ashton Novell, one in particular. Ironically, my mother, who is a doctor in social work, that's still in the field, and a litany of people. I could be here all day going on about them.
Well, that's okay. We at least have another 45 minutes, but thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you're shouting out those that have paved the way for you and that have guided you, because it takes a village to get us through to the next level. So after this commercial break, we will come back and Michael will share his experience.
I am Dr. Anthony Estreet, Chief Executive Officer of the National Association of Social Workers. I want to wish you a happy Social Work Month. Social workers are needed now more than ever. In fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says social work is one of the fastest growing professions in the United States. Social workers are needed to address our nation's mental health crisis, rising rates of death by suicide, and income inequality that led to more than 650,000 Americans being unhoused in 2023. Social workers are on the front lines addressing many of those issues. That is why this year's Social Work Month theme is Empowering Social Workers, Inspiring Action, Leading Change. We will focus on pushing ways our nation can support the life-affirming critical work you do. This includes pushing for higher social work wages, lower caseloads, higher reimbursement for clinical social workers, and an interstate licensing compact that would allow social workers to practice in several states. And for more information on Social Work Month, visit socialworkmonth.org. Enjoy Social Work Month.
Hey, we are back to the 7th episode of Mental Moments here Wednesday night, and we're so excited that you've joined. I see you guys on Instagram, so thank you so much. We switched over to a new platform, and so we're working out the kinks, so we just appreciate you guys being there with us. Make sure you put in the comment field hashtag Mental Moments with an S. Just share the love. So we were talking about the effects and whether or not you were emotionally prepared to engage in this profession. And it is not an easy profession, just like being a pastor is not an easy profession, because you're dealing with people on an emotional level all the time. And then sometimes we ask ourselves, who can we turn to? Like the song says, when we need love, when we need some affection, when we need some attention, or we need someone to bounce our thoughts off of. So Michael, share with us, he's coming back. All of our guests are coming back now. So could you share with us your experience and how you are treading?
So I initially wanted to say that I was prepared because the social work department kind of wrapped their arms around me. I deal with depression. Norfolk State.
Okay.
Yeah, the only university. Yeah, the only one. Behold.
The only one.
The only one. So I had professors like Professor Waits. I had Miss Unisco, Professor Brenda Exum, of course, Dr. Sawyer, Dr. Fairfax, who is unashamedly my favorite, that I could have conversations with. And then, of course, Miss Unisco was the person that pushed me to go counseling when she saw me kind of spiraling. So they definitely believe in making sure that we take care of ourselves. So as we say in the pulpit, that we don't bleed all over the congregation, right? And then I had some tragedy strike during my senior year, and I was able to turn to my internship supervisor in the field, Mr. Vernon Williams, who ran the drug court for Portsmouth Behavioral Healthcare. So I had a plethora of people that I could turn to kind of help me deal with life and school and family, and also the interactions with the clients. In my professional experience, though, I've dealt with a lot of loss. So I've had clients die, and nothing prepares you for that. Even if you've experienced loss in your personal life, nothing prepares you for that. Such that even this week, Monday morning, I get a phone call that one of my clients that I just had lunch with a week and a half ago had passed away. And I just cried and cried and cried and cried and cried. And so I don't know that it's possible, honestly, even if we had an infinite amount of time, because of the diverse amount of issues that we face, not just on any given day, but on any given person who has a bunch of issues themselves. I don't think it's possible to be adequately prepared. The best that you can do is know that it's okay to feel however you feel. And that the best thing that you can do for yourself and for everybody else that you interact with, between your clients, your community, your family, is to get help and talk to somebody about it and process that information. And I think that's particularly important in our community, especially for our males, because the environment says that we're supposed to tough it out and hold everything in. And
Yep.
so if you have an undergraduate or a graduate experience that makes space for men, particularly African American men, to feel things, to express those feelings, and depending on what generation you are, to express them inappropriately and learn how to express them appropriately, both personally and professionally. I think that's the best kind of advanced guard that we have against the burnout that comes from the emotional toll that the work that we do. Because if you're not called for this, it doesn't matter what skill you have, like you have to be built for this. So this work that I do, I was born to do this work. I just didn't have a name for it. I didn't know what a social worker.
Wow.
I didn't know what a social worker was. With or without the title, we would, all of us on here, because I actually know everybody now, all of us would have done this work. You have to have a heart to help people.
Yeah.
You have to have a mind to develop yourself to be the best professional helper that you can be. And so I think one of the strengths that our school of social work, I graduated with Malira, we were close. Like our whole 2013 is just close.
Mhm.
We're
2013.
good.
He had to go there. The number 2013.
We're close. And so I think when you have peers that have kind of been through the fire with you, that you're friends with, that you've done group projects with, that you've done community service with, you have that bond. Then when you step into the professional sphere, then you know that you have somebody that you can go back that knew you when you were, you know, a snotty-nosed freshman, whether you were 17, 18, or 25, or 40 as a freshman. You know you have a crew that can ride with you with whatever difficulty. I think that's just as important as having that professional education and those professional mentors to guide you through, but to have a peer support system. And so that's how I've made it so far. And that's why I didn't quit my job on Monday when I found out that my client died and I was screaming, "This too much," right? So that peer support is a professional development.
I know at NYU, I was working on my master's in drama therapy, and it was mandatory for us to have a therapy session, or not necessarily a therapy session, but you had to find a therapist within the arena that they gave us. But we had to actually go to therapy, and it was part of the curriculum, and that was something that we had to do, that was built in. So as a social worker, the insurance, is your insurance, do you have like great insurance as far as like that can help you find a therapist? Or when you're doing, just like when you're at your regular job as a, you know, outside of the social work profession, but when you have like a sibling that passed away, or such and such that may pass away, or hazardous pay, does the social work community have something of that caliber for their workers?
I was gonna say it depends on where you work, honestly. So for me, my experience is a little different. So I'm in the entrepreneurial realm of social work. So technically I don't have access to those things. So if something happens in my life, honestly, I don't get paid if I don't show up. And I think for me, I can only speak from my experience, that can become kind of hard, because then you don't want to take off time and things like that. And I remember during COVID, I had lost 26 people back to back. And the only time I took off was the day of their funeral. But 9 out of 10, I either had a therapy session right before the funeral and right after, because I wanted to make sure that my bills was paid. Now, has that always been my story? No. When I actually worked for agencies, I did have really great insurance where I could tell them, hey, I need EAP services, which is the employee assistant, services for if you have like a crisis and things like that. So it really just depends on where you're working. But I do want to speak to that social work student. A lot of the universities now have free counseling services. And even when I was going to get my bachelor's, I'm kind of like Mike, that's how me and him connected. I wasn't at my best mentally. So I went to the counseling services. I went to find my own therapist. So I would tell any student that is actively in school, see what counseling services your actual school has, because a lot of them have actually invested in a program called Timely Care. And that is 24/7 free counseling services. And I'm getting my PhD, and we have access to that right now too, where you can either get a therapist, you can get a life coach, you can get, you know, a nutritionist or things like that. So what I would say to that student before you get in the field, making sure that you have that counselor. I'm a big advocate, like, make yourself your client first. You know,
Yes.
so when you do get in the field in some of these places, especially like we have a lot of mom and pop spots in the social work field. You know, when you first get in the field, some of us don't start at the big agencies. We may start at community-based services that you're 1099. I don't know about y'all, but I didn't know what a 1099 employee was. So I'm sitting here spending these big bucks, but Uncle Sam won't get in his money. It's certain things in our field that we do need to communicate. And that's why I think it's big to have those mentors or having those individuals that you can call and say, hey, I'm entering into this next level. Can you help me with that? I want to ask Sheridan, because I know for her, she's in a different capacity as far as like administrative side. What are some suggestions that you would give to a social worker who might not be at an organization that has those like what I would call traditional insurances and time off and things like that? What would be some of the advice you can give a person?
She said she was saying that her computer is a little glitchy, so
Practicing
she was
self-care.
okay. She got it. Say it again, Sheridan. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was just said practicing. It's okay. Practicing self-care is really, really important. Taking time out to just take care of yourself. I know that I wish I had that in my social work program. When I went, and I wish I had gone to therapy. They didn't talk to us about that, so I'm glad Norfolk State did. Talk to everybody about that. The biggest piece is practicing self-care. That I can't speak that enough. Whether that's taking yourself out to dinner, practicing some type of relaxation techniques, soaking in a bath when you get finished. It's just necessary. It's so necessary.
Yes. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go to a quick commercial break again, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the absolute joys of social work. All right.
New Wave Capital Suites is a premium styling lounge now conveniently located in Boxyard RTP. Whether you're stopping in for a fresh fade or a shampoo or a facial, our goal is to provide RTP with a space to relax, refresh, and redefine yourself. Welcome to the Capital.
Now know that you are the best you there is. You know that what makes you different makes you more than enough in this world. That your strengths is what brings the world a gift from the Creator. And that your weaknesses make room for your village to show up for you.
We are back. We are back for another episode of Mental Moments. And my co-host, Malara Green, is here with us, and she has brought along some awesome social workers. We are celebrating Social Work Month this whole month. We're nearing the end of it. So question. What are some of the joys of social work? Because I know it's taxing. I know it can be really taxing on you physically as well as mentally. But what are some of the joys that you experience being a social worker? Michael?
For me, it's I think the things that I found to be most joyful was when I was doing my fatherhood work with the Up Center. Hearing the stories about how the work that I did with fathers and grandfathers helped them to reconnect with their children and their grandchildren, because I know that that type of work lives beyond us. I think that's that's probably the most exhilarating. There's always different things. So I'm not a therapist. I got my BSW, and then I went to seminary and got my MDiv. So I don't do therapy, but I try to make sure that whatever services I provide are therapeutic or at least trauma informed. And so often there's aha
What do you
moments
mean by
where,
trauma informed?
so trauma informed, so the basic assumption when you're doing trauma informed, trauma approach, the question is what happened to you? That's the best way that I could say it. Like, it's what happened. So our behaviors are the result of our life experiences. And so very often what we do is we judge people based on their behaviors and their actions and the outcomes, which you can't really treat or support. But if you ask the question, what happened and how you got to that point, then it helps you to be more sympathetic, more empathetic. It also helps to keep you humble because you realize that, as they say, but for the grace of God go I. So it helps me to relate to you better, to know that when I'm looking at you, I see my mother, I see my wife, I see my brother, I see my children. And how would I want somebody to treat them if it were them in that situation?
That's good.
And so kind of having that, and that goes in line with our social code of ethics and my personal ethics, being a minister, to be able to treat people like you've had certain experiences in life that caused you to make these decisions. And how can I support you so that you don't make those same decisions in the future? And so having people, whether it's working with fathers, whether it's working with the chronically homeless with serious mental illness, HIV, AIDS, or substance use, like I did when I was a Shelter Plus Care Case Manager, having conversations with people and they have those aha moments where they see something from a different perspective. Even if it doesn't lead to immediate change, we know if they can change their perspective, they can change their thinking, they can change their behavior. And just knowing that I played some small part in that is very rewarding. It's rewarding for me. So that's been the best. Everything has been kind of boiled down to that, in how I know that something I said, something that I did, some support that I made helped somebody make a life change that was going to benefit them and their family and the community.
That is awesome. That was awesome. I heard you say about fathers, sons, and grandfathers. A program that is really, really awesome. So what type of program was that?
So the initial one that I did with the Up Center was the Responsible Fatherhood Program. And in that program, we taught healthy relationships and did a fatherhood course, and also gave them job training skills through the Up Center books, I think formerly Spotlight Books. The second iteration of the grant was the Strengthening Fathers Program. And for there, we worked with juveniles aged 16 to 24 who were incarcerated and had children, and then provided them with life coaches, which I also served as a volunteer when they got out. And then the last iteration that I had before I took over as the Director of Reentry Services for the Portsmouth Sheriff's Office was Dad Engagement Specialist through the Up Center. And that program was actually designed to educate and support new and expectant fathers so that we could positively impact Black maternal health outcomes. Because as we know, Black and brown moms are experiencing really, really negative health outcomes during pregnancy, post-pregnancy, and then, some of the children aren't thriving. And so just kind of providing education and support for the fathers so that they could do what they needed to do to support moms so that we could continue to have a healthy and thriving community. So those
That
are
is so awesome. That is so awesome. Anthony,
Yeah,
what has been a few of your highlights in the social work field?
Well, to piggyback on Mr. Jones, the aha moment, that moment where you see it all come together, that moment where you have that client who has, especially in the case of trauma, when you see them walking out of that fog that has wrapped around them for so long that it shaped them into something they no longer recognize, being the agent of change. I like another highlight is speaking to people, that access, just for what it is, the access that you get as a licensed clinician. You get to go do speaking engagements. And I'll never forget, I was doing an engagement when we were talking to young teenage males. They called it Black Boy Joy. And one of them spoke about a very personal experience with his in terms of bullying, and sitting down, looking him in the eye, speaking to him about how to navigate that. but also being able to connect, because at this point I'm the older person, but being able to connect to that child through channeling my own trauma from dealing with things as a child in school and with bullying, and seeing the light turn on, seeing that moment of inspiration come about. And then another piece is just the camaraderie that comes from it, because you meet really great people and you work with people, these teams that come together. I remember even just in-home counseling, the power of a good interdisciplinary team that really has the client, the kid, or whoever's best interest in mind is rare but beautiful, because once these beautiful minds, these powerful minds come together, and then you're sitting here, you're like, we have this plan of action here. We're going to put this in motion. The parents on board, the child's on board, or if it's an older person, they're on board. Those moments stand with me the strongest. Just the connection, and like Mr. Jones said, those aha moments, that energy. It's like a dance. And when that dance comes together and goes the right way, you never want to stop dancing.
Oh, he's so poetic. I was like, oh, he's just saying all these words like it's a dance and it's this. I was like, oh, he's so poetic. Do you like to write? So, Malira?
Yes. Well, I would say for me, it has been, oh my goodness, becoming what I needed growing up. To be
That's a book. That's a book, Becoming What I Needed.
Yeah, becoming what I needed growing up. Going from the person that was about to add to the 139 successful suicides every day when I was 17, when I actually met Mike. I remember being suicidal, and he saved me many days doing our social work program. That's why he will forever be my male best friend, and then my female best friend is Sheridan. So, but it was the space of me being able to go back and realizing that all of that pain was for a reason. Like now I get to work with the people who get a title of crazy. I am one of few clinicians here in the Hampton Roads area that work with individuals who have schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type, virtually in their homes, and make sure that they're stabilized and they don't become hospitalized. I have one young lady who haven't been in a hospital for a whole year because she's working with me. For me, that gives me the strength, that gives me the space of like, the person that people call crazy, I'm able to normalize for them that you're not crazy. You're just seeing stuff that other people can't see. So let's actually put a name to it. I absolutely adore when people look at me and they say, Malira, I feel like a human being. When for the first time in their life, they actually feel seen. I get so much joy when I hear people say, yo, I've been working with therapists for 15 years and here I'm working with you for 6 weeks doing your specialized program. And now I can go into the store again or be around these people and I don't have the same response that I have. So for me, it's seeing people get their life back. Like my favorite quote by Les Brown, he said that most people die at age 30. We just don't get buried until we're 70. So when I'm doing social work, I look at it as CPR. I literally give people back their life, and it's not a God complex at all. It is literally, if they don't ever come and sit in front of me, they're going to be missing a part of them to keep going. And that's why I keep showing up. I piggyback on Anthony as well. I absolutely adore the speaking engagements and being able to get in front of people who normally won't hear social workers. The reason why this was so important for me tonight is because people really diminish what social workers actually provide this world. We are so much more than what they portray on movies like Precious and different movies that they have out here. Like you have therapists that's up here. You have reentry directors that's up here. You have people who are executive administrators up here. Like there's so much that we can do in this field. And that's my payoff, is showing people that I can be a social worker, someone who, specializes in trauma, someone who specializes in anxiety, someone who's a sex therapist. Like I can do that with my degree as a social worker. So that brings me so much joy. I absolutely adore the work that I do. And last piggyback with Mike is, listen, I get paid to literally just live and be me. There is no other profession that I can wake up in the morning as Malira and get some money for it, besides being a social worker. And that's what I do.
So what does the average day of a social worker looks like, Sheridan? I know you said you're on the clerical side, on the administrative side of it, but if you can share.
So I'm on the administrative side now, but I also do outpatient therapy as well. And I've also done work in foster care. So my work in foster care definitely, it was waking up every day, going to work, um, making connections for my families and my children, whether that was to get physicals done, dental appointments scheduled, medication management appointment, therapy appointments, connecting with specialized providers within the community, typing up documentation, because in social work, if you didn't write it down or you don't type it up, it didn't happen, it didn't exist. So a paper trail is super important.
Why is Michael laughing? Were you a
Michael
little
understands.
negligent with the writing of the papers, making the
All of
documentation?
us, if you didn't write it down, it did not happen. That's
It
the
did not
rule.
happen. That's the
Yeah.
rule of thumb in social work. If you don't document it, and in foster care, you have to document so thoroughly. Like everything in foster care has to be documented thoroughly, because we have to remember, just because social services had custody of these kids, their parents still had their rights. And sometimes those kids were going back home. And parents had a right to ask for the files and to see what was going on with their kids. So if there's a new scratch on a child, we had to do an incident report. We had to document all of that. Um, every emergency room visit, every conversation you had with the family, or every conversation you had with the social worker, everything was heavily documented. Even going to court, I spent a lot of time going to court fighting for my clients, for their needs, and just advocating for what they needed, if they should go home, if they shouldn't go home. I had several times where I was in verbal disagreements, I'll say, with many social workers, because I was like, this going home is not going to be healthy for these kids right now. I'm fighting for the adoption. Or I have the ones where I was like, okay, I'm fighting for these kids to go back to their parents. So it's that day in the life is just nothing but advocacy. Even now, on the clerical or administrative side, is making sure that the people are informed about what's going on, the new events that's happening. I do a lot of work with Malira about events that she has, and sending out emails to keep everyone informed. And a lot of the and I don't want to say clients, but a lot of our participants are like, oh my gosh, your emails are so amazing. Thank you for keeping us informed and keeping us together. That's the day in the life of that. And as a therapist, it's just reassuring my clients that they got this and they can make it through this. I had a client today where I met with her yesterday, and she emailed me today. She just said, thank you for your words of encouragement. And we had a conversation about her meeting with several other therapists prior to me. She was like, and they just didn't work out, and I didn't understand. So I explained to her, things happen in due time. You're supposed to open up in due time. I said, and it wasn't your time to open up with them. I said, but God sent me your way. I said, and he knew that you were ready. So now was the time for you to open up, and where you can truly embrace and understand the skills that you need to continue through, even though you've had so much trauma happen to you. So different, every role, every type of social worker, a day in the life is different. It never.
Yeah. So it has to be, because I'm just thinking, listening to all of you speak about your everyday life, or the every moment, because every moment can be different. You may foresee something, or you plan for this to happen that day, but from my understanding, in the work of social work, it's the luck of the draw. It's just like, okay, what's falling out the sky today? So with that being said, do you feel like sometimes, do you second guess yourself sometimes? Because I don't know if y'all remember, and I know another person that's up here, he remembers, Pastor Kemp, in DC, remember where in the social worker went to the home. It was a huge case. And the little girl had been dead for a minute, or was missing. They still haven't found the little girl's body, but that was when they really kind of like shed the light on social workers and how much overtime they were doing, because they were overworked.
Yeah.
overworked, and sometimes things fall through the cracks because you are so inundated, like Sheridan said, with so much paperwork or with all the site visits, with all the doctor's appointments. And sometimes, do you feel like I signed this paper to say that this child can go back to their parents or go back to an environment, and it just didn't sit well with you? Or how do you process that? How do you go through the process of elimination of actually making an informed decision that could be very crucial?
I know for me, I personally struggle with imposter syndrome a lot because I genuinely care about the livelihood of my clients. However, with my imposter syndrome, each person that is on the screen are people that I can message, text, and say, hey, like, let me consult with you real quick. And I think that for me is what helps me push through, especially if I know that something I'm about to do is going to be, I look at social work as life and death. Every decision that I make, everything that I say, every activity that we do can either put them one step closer to living again or one step closer to death. So I literally have a streamlined circle of people that I can go to and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. This is what's going on with this client. And of course, we do follow HIPAA and all of that. There's a way that we can do consultation, but I make sure that I have a good team of people around me because I'm always growing. The second thing I've done is become a clinical supervisor. Why is that so important? Because now I have to know my stuff. I have to be well versed in the policies and procedures. I have to know the changes in our ethics. I have to understand how to make what they say book work actually practical. And then for me personally, a lot of my cases are very high risk. I get asked all the time, like, Malira, why do you do this work? Like, you aren't afraid for your license to be taken away. And then that goes into my spiritual piece. I feel like God called me to this work. So I always tell people, if my license ever get taken away, that just means God want me to do something different. But I am very intentional about how I work with my clients, who I collaborate with, that's going to really be helpful. And then I also make sure that I'm constantly getting my knowledge. We have to do continuing education credits in order to continue to maintain with social work. I think for me, the only thing that I would say is I just challenge the world to get to know what the ham sandwich social workers actually really do. Because I feel like if they better understood what we do, we wouldn't have so much burnout in our field, because they will understand I'm not just giving you resources, but I'm sitting here consoling this mom whose child is missing. You know, I also have to have phone calls. A lot of us have some on call. So if something's going on with our client, we may get a call in the middle of the night. Even an outpatient, we can tell them, don't call me past 8 o'clock. But if something happening, they're going to call and text and make sure they're fine. So I just advocate for people to really understand what social workers do, so then you can support the things that we are doing in our community.
Michael?
So with me, I think the difficulty comes, I'm able to use my social work degree in like all of my life type stuff. So I have my own tutoring business. And it helps me to process information about the best way to help, because I'm able to identify from a holistic perspective. And so I'll just give you like a quick example. So one of the things that I tell my parents is students can't learn when they're hungry, when they're tired, or when they're scared, right? They're just not able to learn. And I tutor like from kindergarten all the way through college. And so when I'm having this consultation services with the parents about how we're going to move forward with the support that I offer, I'm able to kind of get a good look at the whole family, about what the day looks like for them. So it's kind of less about me, but them, what the day looks like for them, what those stressors are for them. And then what happens very often as adults and as parents is we forget how serious life is to you when you're a child. So the stuff that my kids think are difficult for me at 41 is just like, oh, that's nothing. Don't worry about it. But at 16, at 14, at 8, it was major. And so for me, that decision, the difficult decisions are, do I continue to engage with this student? Do I continue to engage with this family? How do I not let the preacher or the social justice advocate rise up when I'm dealing with our fair complected educators in the classroom who I know are treating my students differently because of the color of their skin, or their special needs diagnosis is prompted by the color of their skin or the classroom environment, the teachers not understanding culture, the lack of opportunities, all that stuff. And so it's really harder for me.
Show. That's a whole that's a whole nother show.
The areas that I struggle with are because, like Malira said, this social work ministry allows me to wake up and be me every day. But I also know that I'm still presenting as a 6 foot, almost 300-pound Black man. And am I going to have to can't tone down the height, can't tone down the size, can't turn down the ability to articulate, got to tone down the Blackness, got to tone down the voice in certain environments. And that's really, that thing is kind of a struggle and a frustration. And so what helps me get through those things is being able to call on people and know that I can get help from them, whatever I'm doing, such that Mr. Hoskins doesn't know, but he was instrumental in me graduating from seminary because I reached out to him for my senior capstone project. And he gave me information about a fictional project that we could do that I'm actually going to be able to do in church one day in the future. And so he was one of the social workers that I reached out to. And so I don't think we talked since I graduated in 2022, but I use that as an example because what helps me to get through, like Malira said, and then me and Sheridan are friends too, is being able to talk to your colleagues, your peers who are also your friends to kind of help you process whatever it is that you're going through, because real life sometimes is harder for us than whatever tragic thing that they're going through. Like I had a client that was chronically homeless who dealt with serious mental illness, but through her homelessness, she was raped. And so that's difficult for her. That's difficult for me. Now I'm trying to manage that with everything else that I have going on in my life. And so being able to turn to other people, that's really kind of what helps me to get through, between my therapist and my pastor and my wife and my mom and then all my friends. That kind of helps me get through. Yeah. So the decision-making process is easier when you're not trying to live life alone.
Say that again.
He muted himself.
The decision-making process is easier when you're not trying to live life alone.
A lot of us are trying to do this thing called life by ourselves. A lot of us are, especially those that are always helping other people. Because sometimes if you really dig into the heart of the matter, we're helping other people or busying ourselves to help other people because we don't want to deal necessarily with the things that we got going on. So it's difficult. It's difficult. This thing called life is difficult. And it definitely means a lot when you have friends of substance, colleagues of substance, not just people that are just figures in your life or figurines or puppets in your life that's going to be yes people. But it's good when we have people that can say, Malira, sis, I need you to just bring it down a notch because we need to have a conversation, because sometimes we're just so overwhelmed and inundated with so many things that it's important that we take a beat and to visit our tribe. And I'm so happy tonight that you, Michael, had an opportunity to say to Dr. over here, Mr. Hoskins over here, that, hey, thank you. You did this for me. And then Malira saying, okay, how Sheridan, how Anthony, how Michael have all played an instrumental role in her life. What are some laws that can be changed as it relates to social work or mental health? Anyone?
I want you guys to think about that. We are going to go to a commercial break really quick.
Yes.
But that is going to be the question that we're going to come back with, is what are some laws or policies we feel like we can change to really make this conversation worthwhile? So we'll be back.
Thank you. Thank you, Malira.
Malik is in the hospital. He got admitted last night.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I'm Dr. Naomi Samuels. I'm Malik's sister.
Why is he here?
Malik is getting the best care possible. Naomi, you really got to get a handle on your anger issues.
Something is not in my life, Trey.
But I'm about to figure it out.
Maybe you need to check yourself.
The four of you have always been there for each other, even when you had your differences.
Sometimes God allows minor setbacks for major comebacks. Trust me, it's all gonna work out.
Everyone expects me to show up for them. But who the hell is gonna show up for me?
We are family, and family sticks together.
If you haven't done so already, please download BET Plus and check out the movies that we got going on. Did y'all see Pastor Mike in that? I don't know if y'all know Pastor Mike. He is really a pastor, Pastor Mike.
Listen, so real quick, they're doing a free concert and it's a whole tour. It is him, Dietrich Haddon.
Oh my
people. And I'm going here in Hampton Roads on June the 7th, I believe. So please get that. But every time I see that commercial, Tosh, I want to tell you I am super proud of you. And I'm going to keep telling you that every time we play it. And I love it because as we're talking about social work, that show and that movie really talks about mental health. So if you guys have not caught it yet, we're going to continue to play it and push it because mental health is definitely important, which brings together our last question for our guest here is what are some policies, laws that we may need to look at or actually advocate for to really make change?
They're like,
I'll jump in on this one.
All of them.
Yeah, that's about it. All of them. I mean, for starters, I'm going to liken it to the way that when teachers, you had your teachers who've done it for years, been good, know how to have relationships with the students, actually taught, and then they brought along certain credentials that teachers had to have, and you wiped out an entire generation of good teachers. That is something that's happening in our profession, in my honest and professional opinion. And while I'm not against the designations of QMHPs or things of that nature, I am for people being properly trained. There are some good people that they may not have the time to get everything that they need to get to be able to work with certain populations, but let them have a chance. Let's make a way for them. Let's make some training opportunities because unfortunately, everyone isn't going to be able to be licensed. Everyone isn't going to be able to be in private practice, but you will have people that they can help in so many different ways. And then also allow us a grace period so that we can get our diagnosis for people before the insurances start trying to decline everything. These insurances, because being in private practice, though the fight with insurances is a whole episode in itself. So realize that we're dealing with people, not numbers. Let's stop having people live by their diagnosis so that we can help them with their diagnosis. And that's just the start for a few. Some of the things I believe could change.
That's really good. How the insurance companies push them along, just push them along. And you said the grace period needs to be a little bit longer.
Yeah, because basically, if you don't have a diagnosis by first session, you're not getting paid. You may get back paid if you're diagnosed down the road, but if you want to, and I've done where I've had to just wait because I'm not comfortable on that first session. It may take 2 sessions for me to get a real tight picture of what you're truly working with. But if you don't have a diagnosis on that in your billing, you're not getting anything.
And just like Malira, I think Sheridan and Malira were speaking about how when a person comes to you or when you're just first meeting them, they don't know you from a can of paint. So why would they even feel comfortable sharing their innermost thoughts with you on the first session? Like even when you go on a first date, you'll never the real you isn't there. Maybe after the 6th date, the real you might come through. But with counseling and like the interviewing process, like you said, 1 session, I really don't believe is adequate to give a proper diagnosis. So I think you're absolutely right about that. Sheridan's like,
It's
So
not. I totally agree with that. It's not. And just to even go a little bit further, I think one thing that a lot of the policymakers should do, I really think it should be a requirement and it should be a policy in itself. A lot of the individuals that sit in Congress and make all of our laws are so far removed from the work itself that we do that they forget where they started and how things have happened and how the world is constantly changing, so constantly new things are coming up. I honestly think it should be a requirement that they all come back to the the real world in which we work with these clients and do more hands-on, and or even if it's just for a week, just to really help them understand, the needs that our clients have, because let's be honest, we shouldn't have taken this long for mental health to be as big of a push as it is now.
yeah, you're absolutely right. So my question before we get off this evening, because here we are back at 10 o'clock, the time always escapes us because this conversation is very important and very needed. How can we celebrate you? We just want to know. How can we celebrate social workers? What is it that you need from us, the community?
Money. Just not for me, but for our profession. Social workers. I mean, nobody really that goes into the helping profession gets paid what they're worth. So I'm not expecting that. But I think Malira leader, everybody kind of alluded to it or said it directly. If the general public knew more about not only what we actually do, but what we can do with our social work degrees, whether it's a bachelor's, whether it's a master's, whether it's a PhD in social work or DSW, if the general public knew what we did and what we could do, they would have a greater appreciation for us, then they could advocate. So we get our degrees, we get jobs, we work in the field for 10 years for a nonprofit agency or for the state, and then we get our loans forgiven, right? But we're underpaid the whole 10 years. I would much rather that some of that money, don't lose it, but go into scholarships to pay for people to study social work and matriculate through undergraduate and graduate programs, and also begin to develop feeder systems. And we have magnet schools for the STEMs. We need feeder systems for social work. There needs to be introductions to the work that we do in the health profession at the middle school level and at the high school level. And so when people are beginning to decide what they want to do, we can have a group of children, a group of people, particularly prior to some of the trauma, because most of us that went into the field, something bad happened. There are a few of us that are lucky enough to where we didn't have a horrible experience that led us into it. But if we can get students equipped and prepared going into college, ready their freshman year, having an idea of what they want to do with their career, knowing what NABSW does and what NASW does and all the different professional social work associations do, then that will be a good way to celebrate us. Because I don't really care how many points LeBron James has. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care how many three-pointers Steph Curry can hit in a game. It does nothing for me. But I need to know that if my daughter goes through something, I got Malira or Sheridan, that if my son is going through something, I got somebody like Mr. Hoskins that I can turn to that is culturally competent and really cares and is compassionate. That's a good thank you, because that thank you becomes generational. We can go with that. We can grow with that. We can build off of that. And then in 50 years, we'll see what our profession looks like, not only as a whole, but particularly for Black professionals in this field. That'd be a great thank you for me.
I love that. I love. Did anyone else want to share? I know that they have is it called people personnel workers in the school system? I know in Maryland, they had something like, it was almost like a social worker wherein you went into the homes, like if they were truant, like if they were absent a lot, they would go into the homes. Like, I really feel like, especially since right after the pandemic, when we went back to school, like physically went back to school, they should have had the social, like a social worker, designated to each school. They be sharing nurses, like the people in the office be giving medication. It's just like, what are we doing, politicians, as it relates to the money and the finances that need to go into the school system? It's not there.
And that's the hard part. I would say for me, a good thank you, honestly, would be understanding that we need to reallocate funds. We do.
Yes.
I think one thing that COVID showed us is, just like Rochelle from Everybody Hate Chris would say, I don't need this job. That is literally what COVID taught people, that we don't need these jobs. I can go and Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and make more in one day than I made in a week actually doing a 9 to 5. So I think a lot of it has to be reallocating those funds for sure. And then 2, if we're going to have a social work month, to all my employees that have social workers, celebrate your social workers. Nothing bugs me more than being a dialysis social worker and it was Nurses Week and they had the balloons and stuff up. They had lunch for them. They had gifts and they had days off. And then here goes social work month and cricket. And I'm like, yo, you can't even open up your clinic without a social worker, but you don't celebrate us. So I think just to thank you, honestly, just acknowledging that we're here and we're ready to rock and roll, really, is what I think will be a good thank you. And for me, having all of you guys here today, because I know we're at our grace period, having y'all come, for me, that's a big thank you. That shows me that you guys see me as someone who is a great colleague, and I do cherish each of you, which is why I hand asked y'all to come up here, because I wanted for people to see Black social workers out here actually doing the darn thing. So I want to just say thank you to you guys for sure.
I think we have one more commercial, and then we come back. We're going to say goodnight and all that good stuff. Okay? So now we're off to the commercial break, and when we come back, we'll close you out.
So on May the 25th, we have our first annual The I'm Enough Renewal of the Mind Conference 2024 at Grove Church, VA. What are we doing? We are bringing together mind, body, and spirit. We are no longer allowing for mental and spiritual to be engaged, but we're marrying the two so that people can understand that if you have a mind, you have a mental health, and we can't do nothing with our faith if we don't believe that God can do it for us. So come out, grab your tickets. We are super duper excited. We have our host, Talita Riddick. We're going to have all of these amazing panelists is going to be on our show as well. We have Minister Tracy Georges that's going to be one of our keynote speakers. And there are so many more goodies that are going to be coming up. But what we really want you to understand is you cannot be your best self if you don't take care of yourself, mind, body, and spirit. So go ahead and grab those tickets. They're only $25, but the I'm Enough Renewal of the Mind Conference hosted by M. Green Enterprises on May the 25th in Portsmouth, Virginia. Make sure you are there.
We are back. And this has been another mental moment. But check us out next week, next Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, when we will have the writer of, what's the name of my movie? For What It's Worth. What It's Worth. I just had a brain fart, everybody, and it was, movie I was in. But check us out next Wednesday night when we will have the writer of For What It's Worth. It's about a family that grew up in the foster care system, and once they became adults, the trauma displayed in different ways. So we'll have the writer of that movie, and we'll also have the producer of that movie on next Wednesday night. And also one of the main characters will also be a part of our discussion, who also suffer from some disorder. So we want to wait. We cannot wait until next Wednesday night. So come check us out, 9:00 p.m. for another episode of Mental Moments. We love you. Be well.